The morning sky of Varan Prime shimmered with silver clouds that reflected the twin suns above. The palace stood like a monument carved from crystal and light, its towers reaching high into the thin air. It was the seat of the Tavani Empire, ancient, proud, and powerful. And that morning something unusual arrived at its gates. A human. Captain Elias Ward stepped off the landing pad wearing his black uniform, clean and simple compared to the ornate robes of the aliens waiting for him. He felt their eyes on him, cold and judging. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic stage, known for their bravery but also for their unpredictable behavior. Among the Tavani nobles, they were considered primitive, creatures of instinct rather than refinement. The commander of the Royal Guard, a tall alien with sapphire-colored skin and silver eyes, stepped forward. "Captain Elias Ward," he said in a voice that carried both respect and distance. "You have been assigned as the royal protector of Princess Lyria, daughter of Empress Kayla. You will serve until further notice." Elias nodded. Understood. His voice was calm, professional. Inside, he already knew what kind of assignment this was. A symbolic gesture, a human bodyguard for an alien princess, a political move to strengthen peace between their species. Nothing more. The commander led him through shimmering corridors filled with floating lights and whispering servants. Every inch of the palace glowed with elegance. As they reached the grand chamber, Elias saw her, the princess he was meant to protect. Princess Lyria stood near a wide balcony, looking out at the golden sky. Her silver-blue hair shimmered like liquid moonlight, and her long gown seemed to flow with a faint glow of its own. She didn't turn to greet him. When she finally did, her expression was sharp, almost cold. "So this is the human protector?" she said softly. Her voice was musical but carried a clear edge. "My mother thinks your kind can be trusted with royal safety?" Elias bowed slightly. "Your Highness, I am here to ensure your protection." "Nothing more." Lyria tilted her head, studying him with faint amusement. "Protection? From what, Captain Ward? My people have guarded this palace for centuries. Do you think one human soldier will make any difference?" He didn't argue. He simply said, "I will do my duty." Her eyes lingered on him, clearly unimpressed. "Humans," she murmured, turning away. "Always so confident. Always pretending not to fear." Elias remained silent. He had heard worse. He had served in alien wars, seen strange worlds, and stood in places where humans were treated like outsiders. This was just another assignment. Or so he thought. That night, as the suns dipped below the horizon, the palace lights dimmed to a soft blue. Elias stood outside Lyria's chamber, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the empty corridor. Most guards considered this duty dull, but he knew danger often came when everyone believed they were safe. Inside the room, the princess sat by her mirror, brushing her silver hair. Her attendant poured her a drink of royal nectar, a glowing liquid used only by the imperial bloodline. Lyria lifted the glass, her mind elsewhere, until Elias suddenly spoke from behind the door. "Don't drink that." His tone was firm, controlled. The attendant froze, looking toward the closed door, then at the princess. Lyria frowned. "Excuse me, Captain, you are not permitted to—" Elias stepped in quickly, his eyes sharp. "The drink. Look closely at the surface." Confused and irritated, Lyria glanced at the glass. The liquid shimmered strangely, a faint oily layer forming on top. Elias took a small device from his belt, scanned it, and the reading flashed red. "Poison," he said simply. "Fast-acting. You would have been dead within minutes." The attendant gasped and dropped the serving tray. Lyria's face turned pale. For a moment she couldn't speak. Elias called in 2 guards immediately, ordering them to detain the servant for questioning. His movements were quick and professional, his voice steady. When it was over, the princess stood silently watching him. "How did you know?" she finally asked, her tone softer now. Elias shrugged slightly. Human eyes are sensitive to refractive changes. The liquid surface looked wrong. She stared at him as if reassessing everything she had said earlier. "You saved my life," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Just doing my job, Your Highness." Lyria looked away, hiding her thoughts behind her calm face. But that night she didn't sleep easily. Somewhere in the dark, a thought kept returning. If not for the human, she would be dead. The next morning, the palace was tense. The council gathered to discuss the poisoning attempt. Some claimed it was the work of a rival noble house. Others suspected the rebellion growing beyond the capital, but none could agree on who wanted the princess dead. Lariah sat silently through the meeting, her gaze occasionally drifting to where Elias stood at the edge of the room. He didn't speak, didn't even look at her. Yet something in his stillness gave her comfort, a strange feeling she couldn't explain. After the meeting, she approached him in the hallway. "Captain," she began hesitantly, "your actions last night were unexpected. You may have my thanks." Elias gave a small nod. "I was trained to expect the unexpected, Your Highness." "You were trained well," she admitted. Her voice softened, almost reluctant to sound grateful. "But don't assume this means I suddenly trust your kind." "I don't," Elias said with a faint, respectful smile. "Trust has to be earned." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than she intended before she walked away. Days passed. Elias learned the routines of the palace, the guards' rotations, the secret passages behind the crystal walls, the strange glowing gardens where the princess liked to walk. She rarely spoke to him, but he noticed small changes. She no longer ignored him completely. Sometimes she even asked his opinion about patrols or security measures. One evening, while escorting her to the Royal Observatory, she asked, "Do humans always act so serious, Captain? You stand like a statue." He chuckled quietly. "Comes with the job. If I relax too much, I might miss something important." She smiled faintly. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. "You are strange, human. You speak little, yet your silence feels loud." Before Elias could answer, a sudden tremor shook the palace. The glass floors vibrated under their feet, and alarms began to echo from the corridors. Guards rushed past them, shouting about an explosion in the outer courtyard. Elias moved instantly, placing himself between the princess and the nearest exit. "We need to move now." They hurried down the stairs as smoke began to fill the air. Somewhere above, the sound of plasma weapons echoed. The royal guards engaged unseen attackers. As they reached the lower hall, another blast shattered part of the wall. Lyria stumbled, but Elias caught her, pulling her out of the way just before debris crashed down. Dust clouded the corridor, lights flickered, and the air was filled with the scent of burning energy cells. "Who's attacking?" she gasped. "Don't know yet," Elias said, scanning ahead. "But they're inside the palace. Stay behind me." They moved quickly through the corridors, the princess trembling slightly but trying to hide it. The polished floors were now littered with shattered crystals and pieces of gold armor. From the distance came the sound of alien voices, angry, desperate. Elias led her into a side passage, using his wrist scanner to locate an emergency tunnel. "This way," he said, guiding her through a hidden door behind a decorative wall. The tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, carved long ago as a royal escape route. Lariah glanced back, her voice low. "You seem to know my palace better than I do." "I read the maps," he said. "Old habits." She gave him a long look, one filled with mixed feelings, distrust, curiosity, and something new. "You're not like the others," she said softly. "Neither are you," he replied without looking back. They continued down the tunnel until they reached a sealed door. Behind it, faint tremors rumbled, the distant echoes of battle. Elias turned to her, his expression calm even in the chaos. "We'll wait here until I'm sure it's safe." Lariah looked at him in the dim light. The human who once seemed out of place in her perfect world now stood between her and death. Her pride told her to stay distant, but her heart whispered something else, something she didn't yet understand. And as the sound of explosions faded into the distance, Princess Lyria realized that the protector she had never wanted might be the only reason she would live to see another sunrise. The palace that had once glowed with peace now echoed with chaos. The attack was spreading faster than anyone expected. The royal guards were struggling to hold the outer halls, and communication lines were filled with static. Captain Elias Ward led Princess Lyria through the dim escape tunnel. The lights flickered, and the air was filled with the faint hum of distant power lines buried deep beneath the city. Lyria followed close behind, her once perfect robes now torn by dust and smoke. "How could they reach the inner walls?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Inside help," Elias said shortly. "Someone opened the security gates. It's the only way they could get past the shield walls." She stopped for a second, her face pale. "Inside help? You mean someone from my court?" Elias looked at her quietly. "It's possible." The princess lowered her eyes. The thought of betrayal from her own people hurt more than the danger itself. For the first time, she realized how fragile her world really was. The tunnel curved downward, leading to a section that hadn't been used in generations. Strange markings glowed faintly on the walls. Ancient Tavani script mixed with symbols even she couldn't read. "This place is older than the palace itself," Lyria whispered. "It was built by the first rulers. My mother said these tunnels were sealed long ago." Elias scanned the walls with his wrist device. "They're still stable. We'll be safe here until I find a way out." They continued walking. The sound of distant rumbling shook the ground. Somewhere above, a new explosion made the ceiling tremble, causing dust to fall like silver snow. Elias instinctively moved closer to shield her. When the shaking stopped, Lyria noticed his arm still slightly extended in front of her, a silent barrier between her and danger. Something inside her softened, though she quickly hid it. "You don't have to treat me like I'm made of glass, Captain," she said. Elias gave a half smile. "It's a habit. You humans," she muttered, shaking her head. "You act without thinking." "Maybe," he replied, "but it keeps us alive." After nearly an hour of walking, they reached an old chamber. The walls were covered with glowing vines and metal roots, and at the center stood a large crystal console, ancient but still humming faintly. Elias looked around. "We'll rest here for a moment." Lyria sat on a low stone bench, her expression tired. The faint blue light from the crystal made her look almost ghostly. She had never been this far beneath her own palace. Elias checked his communication link, but the signal was still jammed. "No contact. The rebels are blocking all frequencies." Lyria looked up. "Rebels? You think this is not just a rogue attack?" He nodded. "Too organized. They knew your guard schedule, the hidden exits, and your meeting times. This was planned." The princess's voice grew cold. "Then someone close to me sold the information." Elias studied her carefully. "Someone with access. Maybe one of your advisors or a guard captain." Lyria's gaze hardened. "My mother trusted them all." "I trusted them all." He didn't say anything. He understood that silence was sometimes kinder than truth. Hours passed. The distant sounds of battle grew quieter, but they both knew it wasn't over. The power in the tunnel started to flicker, casting brief shadows across the walls. Suddenly, a deep, mechanical hum filled the chamber. The crystal console glowed brighter, and symbols began appearing across its surface. Lyria rose, curiosity shining in her eyes. "It's responding to us," she whispered. "This system hasn't been active for centuries." Elias stepped closer. "Can you read it?" "Not all," she said softly, running her fingers over the glowing text. "But this symbol, it means sanctuary. It might control old defense systems." Before she could continue, a sound echoed through the tunnel, a metallic clang, followed by footsteps. Elias raised his weapon instantly. "Stay behind me." The tunnel lights flickered as three shadows approached. Figures in dark armor stepped into view. Rebels, their armor painted with red streaks, their faces hidden by visors. One of them spoke in a harsh voice. "The princess is here. Capture her alive." Elias fired first. His energy rifle glowed bright, lighting up the tunnel as bolts of blue light shot through the air. The rebels returned fire, their plasma hitting the walls and sending sparks flying. Lyria ducked behind the crystal console, watching in terror as Elias moved with incredible precision. Each movement was quick and efficient. No wasted motion, no hesitation. He fired, shifted cover, and fired again. Two rebels fell, their armor sparking. The third tried to flank him, but Elias threw a small flash charge. The tunnel burst with white light. When the glare faded, Elias was already behind the rebel, disarming him with one swift strike. The alien dropped to the floor, weaponless. Elias pressed his rifle to the rebel's chest. "Who sent you?" The rebel only hissed in response. Then, before Elias could stop him, the alien activated a small device on his wrist. His armor began to hum, self-destruction. "Get back," Elias shouted. He grabbed Lyria and pushed her behind the stone bench. The explosion was sharp but contained. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood up slowly, coughing, his uniform scorched on one side. Lyria looked at him in shock. "You could have died." He smiled faintly, brushing off dust. Part of the job description. Her eyes softened again. She didn't know why, but her chest felt tight when she saw his burned arm. "You risked your life for me again." "I told you, Your Highness," he said simply. "I protect you. That's what I do." She looked at him for a long moment, unsure what to say. The human she had dismissed as a mere soldier had now saved her twice. Something inside her began to change, slowly, quietly, like a seed starting to grow in darkness. After the fight, Elias examined the crystal console again. "We can use this to find another exit," he said. "The system is still active. Maybe it's connected to the surface tunnels." Lyria nodded and helped him translate the glowing runes. Together they found a map of the lower palace, a web of corridors, chambers, and sealed gateways. One section flashed green. "There," she said. "That's a supply lift. It leads to the lower gardens. From there we can reach the air docks." "Good," Elias said. "We move before more come." They left the chamber, walking quickly but carefully. The tunnel air was thick with smoke and dust. Lyria coughed lightly and Elias offered her his small breathing mask. She hesitated before taking it. "You'll need it too," she said. "I'll manage," he replied. "Humans are built for worse." She put on the mask, surprised by how selfless he was. Every step with him made her realize something uncomfortable, that her opinion of humans had been built on lies and pride. When they reached the end of the tunnel, Elias found the lift blocked by debris. He rolled up his sleeves and began clearing the stones. Lyria tried to help, but he stopped her gently. "Save your strength, Your Highness. If anything happens, you'll need it." Minutes later, he managed to activate the lift manually. The platform groaned and began to rise. As they ascended, faint sunlight filtered through cracks above. For the first time in hours, Lyria saw the open sky again. When they stepped out, the lower gardens were almost unrecognizable. Smoke drifted between broken trees and shattered statues. The once beautiful palace grounds looked like a battlefield. Lyria's eyes filled with sorrow. "All this destruction, my people, my home." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, not as a soldier, but as someone who understood loss. "We'll fix it. But first, we make sure you survive this." Before she could answer, distant gunfire echoed again. The rebels were still out there. Elias tightened his grip on his weapon. "We'll have to move fast. Follow me and stay low." She nodded, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I trust you, Captain." Elias glanced at her briefly. The words surprised him. "That's a good start, Your Highness." Together, they disappeared into the smoke-filled ruins. Two figures from different worlds, one human, one alien, united not by politics or orders, but by survival. And though neither of them would admit it yet, something deeper than duty was beginning to grow between them. Something that neither war nor pride could easily destroy. The ruined gardens stretched before them like a ghost of the palace that once was. Trees once tall and silver-leaved now lay broken on the ground. Shattered fountains dripped stagnant water, and flowers of strange colors had been crushed under debris. Smoke from the outer walls drifted across the sky, creating a gray haze that dimmed the twin suns. Elias led Princess Lyria carefully along a cracked pathway, his rifle scanning every shadow. She followed closely, her once pristine gown now torn and dusty, her silver-blue hair tangled from hours of escape. Despite her exhaustion, her eyes were alert, watching the ruins as if she could somehow memorize everything. "You seem calm," Lyria said quietly, her voice betraying her attempt at composure. Elias glanced at her. "Calm is a choice. Panic doesn't help anyone survive." She shook her head faintly. "I'm not used to this. To being helpless." "You're not helpless," he said firmly, "but sometimes even the strongest need help." "That's why I'm here," she didn't answer. Her pride resisted his words, but inside she knew he was right. She had survived assassins, betrayal, and a palace under attack, not by her own skill alone, but because of him. They moved past a broken fountain, and Lyria noticed a fallen statue of a former empress. Its face was cracked, yet it still seemed to gaze at her as if judging. She shivered and turned to Elias. "This palace, my home, it's almost unrecognizable." He kept walking without looking back. "Focus on getting out. We can mourn what's lost later." The air grew heavier as they approached the lower gardens, where the vegetation had grown wild over centuries of neglect. Crushed pathways forced them to step carefully, and the shadows played tricks on their eyes. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the air. Lyria froze. Elias's hand shot to her shoulder. "Stay calm," he whispered. From the shadows emerged figures in dark armor, the rebels. There were at least 6 of them, armed with plasma rifles that glowed red. Their leader stepped forward, his helmeted face hidden behind a visor. "The princess," he said, voice sharp. "Finally we find you." Elias didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. Blue bolts of energy streaked through the air, striking 2 rebels and forcing the others to dive for cover. Lyria ducked behind a stone bench, gripping her side tightly. "You need to move," Elias shouted over the sound of gunfire. She nodded, following him as he led the way through the broken gardens. Every few steps he fired, covered, and advanced. It was a deadly dance, one that required trust. And for the first time, Lyria realized she trusted him completely. A plasma blast exploded nearby, throwing them both to the ground. Elias pushed himself up first and grabbed her arm. "This way. There's a maintenance tunnel ahead." Lyria followed, her heart racing. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and filled with the smell of damp stone. She stumbled once, and Elias caught her instantly. His grip was firm but gentle, like a lifeline in the chaos. Once inside the tunnel, they paused to catch their breath. Elias examined the corridor with his wrist scanner. "It's stable, but we can't stay long. The rebels will find another way." Lyria looked at him, her voice soft. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me, and yet you risk your life for me again." He studied her for a moment, then replied quietly, "Because it's the right thing to do. You may be a princess, but right now you are just a person who needs help, and no one should face death alone." Her chest tightened. She had spent her life surrounded by guards and advisors, yet never had anyone risked themselves for her simply because it was the right thing. This human, rough, stubborn, simple, had saved her multiple times, and for the first time she didn't know how to respond. They moved through the tunnel for nearly an hour. The distant sound of battle had quieted, but occasional echoes reminded them that the fight was far from over. Elias stopped suddenly. "Listen," he said. Footsteps. More rebels approaching. Lyria held her breath. Shadows moved along the tunnel walls. Elias gestured to a side chamber, barely visible in the dim light. "Quick, in here. Stay low." They slipped into the chamber, a small room filled with old tools and crates. The rebels passed by, not noticing them. Lyria exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. "You're amazing," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Elias shook his head. "You've seen nothing yet. Stay focused. We still need to reach the surface." She nodded, understanding that admiration alone wouldn't keep them alive. But admiration and gratitude were growing stronger inside her. She had never expected to owe a human anything, yet here she was realizing that she owed him her life. The final stretch of the tunnel led them to a large elevator platform. Dust hung in the air and the control panel glowed faintly. Elias examined it. "This should take us to the surface gardens. From there we can reach the air docks and signal for extraction." Lyria watched him work, her mind racing. "And if the rebels follow us? They won't have the element of surprise anymore," he said confidently. "Besides, humans are persistent when it comes to protection." The elevator platform groaned and shuddered as it started moving upward. The walls of the tunnel blurred past as they ascended. Lyria's hand rested on the railing, her other hand brushing against Elias's arm accidentally. She pulled away quickly, embarrassed, but he didn't comment. The platform reached the surface. When the doors opened, the lower garden stretched before them, half wild, half destroyed. Smoke drifted across the remnants of statues and broken fountains. "Stay close," Elias instructed. "We move fast and stay low." They ran through the gardens, dodging fallen trees and debris. Plasma fire echoed in the distance, reminding them that danger was still near. Lyria noticed a group of rebels approaching. Elias pushed her behind a fountain and fired, his aim precise and controlled. One by one, the rebels were forced back. Lyria's heart raced as she watched him fight. Her fear mingled with admiration. This human, whom she had scorned, was now the reason she might survive. After what felt like hours, the rebels finally retreated. Elias lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. Lyria approached him cautiously. You didn't hesitate," she said. He shook his head. "Never. Your life matters more than mine, princess." Her heart skipped. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She had never heard anyone speak to her with such honesty, such devotion, and for the first time, she felt something she hadn't expected, gratitude deeper than mere thanks. Elias helped her to a small clearing where the royal air docks were visible in the distance. Smoke still curled from the rooftops, but they were finally within reach of safety. Lyria looked back at the ruins of her palace and the gardens she had walked since childhood. "All this, it's gone. she murmured. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We can rebuild, but first we make sure you survive. For the first time, she didn't resist his presence. She allowed herself to lean slightly on him as they moved forward. The human who had entered her world unwillingly had become her guide, her protector, and the one she now trusted completely. As they approached the air docks, distant human ships appeared in the sky. Blue lights flickered across the ruins, promising rescue. Lyria's heart lifted, and she realized something she couldn't deny. She owed him. Not because of duty, not because of protocol, but because he had saved her life when everyone else had failed. Elias glanced at her, noticing her expression. We're almost there. Hold on a little longer. She nodded, silently acknowledging that she would follow him through anything. The princess who had once believed humans were weak now knew the truth. They were resilient, resourceful, and brave. And the one standing beside her was the finest example of all. As the first rescue ships landed, casting beams of light across the broken gardens, Elias extended his hand to her. Ready? Lyria took it without hesitation. The moment was simple, but it carried a promise that her life had been saved, and that she could never forget the human who had risked everything for her. And as the ships lifted off, carrying them away from the ruins of the palace, Princess Lyria realized something else. She would never look at humans or at Elias the same way again. The hum of the airship's engines vibrated through the floor as Princess Lyria and Captain Elias Ward were lifted away from the shattered palace. Below them, Varen Prime's capital lay in ruins, smoke curling into the silver-blue sky. The palace that had once been a symbol of beauty and power was now a battlefield, frozen in memory. Lyria leaned against the railing of the airship, her eyes tracing the broken streets, the twisted metal and the fallen statues. She didn't speak at first. Words felt small, inadequate for the destruction she had witnessed, or for the gratitude swelling in her heart. Elias stood beside her, scanning the city below. We're safe for now, he said quietly. The rebels won't reach you here. I know, Lyria said, her voice soft. But everything I have, everything I am, I almost lost it today, and it would have been my fault if not for you. Elias glanced at her briefly, then back to the ruins. It wasn't your fault, Princess. No one could have stopped everything. That's why I'm here. I protect, that's all I do. She studied him in the dim light of the cabin. His uniform was marked with soot and scratches, yet he looked unshaken, calm, almost invincible in her eyes. A strange thought struck her. She had judged him, underestimated him, dismissed him. And now, after seeing him risk his life multiple times, she understood that her opinion of humans had been wrong all along. You always speak so simply, yet everything you do carries weight, she said quietly. Elias shrugged slightly. Simple words, simple actions. They're enough to keep people alive. Her eyes lingered on him, and she felt a mix of admiration, relief, and something unfamiliar. Something like respect and trust intertwined. She had never realized that protection could be given without question, without reward, without expectation, and now she owed him far more than her life. The airship landed at a secure human outpost on the outskirts of the capital. Guards in sleek uniforms quickly surrounded the landing platform, their movements efficient and disciplined. Lyria stepped down carefully, Elias at her side keeping an eye on the perimeter. The outpost commander approached, bowing slightly. Princess Lyria, welcome to our facility. Captain Ward, your report will be received shortly. Elias nodded. Understood, the princess turned to him. You've earned my thanks, Captain. And more than that, you've earned my trust. He gave a small, respectful nod. That's all I need, Your Highness. Even as she spoke, Lyria realized that this trust was something deeper than words could express. It was built on actions, on moments where life and death hung in the balance, on the courage to act when fear could have taken over. Elias had given her more than protection. He had given her safety, understanding, and respect. Days passed at the outpost. Lyria slowly recovered from the shock of the attacks. Her advisors arrived, and the human staff provided careful medical attention. Elias stayed nearby, watching her without intruding, a steady presence that reassured her. One morning, as she walked through the outpost gardens, she found Elias tending to the perimeter sensors, checking them for functionality. You're everywhere, she remarked lightly. though her tone carried no judgment, only observation. "I have to be," he replied, smiling faintly. "Part of the job." She approached him slowly. "I keep thinking about what happened. The palace, the attacks, the betrayal. And I keep coming back to one thought." "And that is?" he asked, curious. "You saved me," she said simply. "Not because I'm a princess, not because it was expected, but because it was right. I don't know how to repay that." Elias paused, looking at her. "You don't have to. You survived. That's repayment enough." Lyria studied him, her mind racing. She realized that the debt she owed him wasn't something she could measure with words or gifts. It was a debt of life, of trust, of understanding. And for the first time, she accepted that she didn't have to pretend to be indifferent or proud. She could simply be grateful and let him know that his actions mattered. Weeks passed and the Tavani capital began to stabilize. The rebellion was suppressed thanks to both human intervention and loyal Tavani forces. Lyria returned briefly to the palace to oversee recovery efforts. The ruins were still smoking, yet the people began to work together to rebuild. Elias accompanied her, silently keeping watch. As they walked through the partially restored gardens, she noticed small signs of his influence: the way debris was cleared, the way the guards were positioned, the way her own safety was prioritized. "You think too much about these details," she said softly. "I think about survival," he replied. "Details keep people alive." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "You're stubborn, and brave, and you're human. And proud of it," he said, glancing at her with a faint grin. She shook her head, laughing lightly despite the chaos around them. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of peace. The human she had dismissed, scorned, and underestimated had become her anchor, her guide, her protector. And she knew without doubt that she owed him her life. One evening, as the twin suns set over the horizon, Lyria and Elias stood on the palace balcony. The city below glimmered with the soft light of recovery, and smoke had mostly cleared. She turned to him, the words she had held back finally finding their place. "Elias," she said, using his first name for the first time. "I wanted to tell you, I owe you. Not because of duty, not because I'm a princess, but because you saved my life. More than once. You've given me something no one else could." Elias looked at her, eyes calm, but his expression softened. "You survived. That's enough for me, Lyria." "No," she insisted. "It's not enough. I can't forget what you did. I can't forget how you risked yourself for me when everyone else turned away. I owe you my life, Captain. And not just that, I owe you my trust." He nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her words. "Then don't, just live. That's the debt I ask of you." Her chest tightened. She had never felt so deeply connected to another being, and yet so humbled by their selflessness. In that moment, she realized that her life had been changed forever. The human she had once considered a simple soldier had become the reason she would see another sunrise. In the weeks that followed, Elias was formally recognized as the protector of the crown, a historic honor unprecedented for a human. The Tavani Council debated the decision, but Lyria's word was final. "He saved me," she said simply, "and that alone makes him worthy." Elias accepted the honor with quiet humility. He didn't seek praise or reward. He had done what he had been trained to do, what he believed was right. And yet the title was significant not for him, but for the bond it represented, a bridge between humans and Tavani, built on courage, respect, and life itself. One evening, as the city slowly returned to normal, Lyria stood beside Elias on the balcony, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. "You know," she said softly, "I never wanted a human protector. I thought I didn't need one. I was proud, and stubborn, and foolish." Elias looked at her with a faint smile. "Sometimes the right choice surprises you," she nodded. "You've taught me that. Not through words, but through action. You've given me a gift I can never repay, my life and my trust. I will never forget it." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then we're even, princess. You live and you remember. That's all I ask." For the first time, Lyria allowed herself to feel peace, not just because the danger had passed, but because she had learned something deeper. Trust could be earned through courage and loyalty, and life could be saved by the simplest, bravest actions. As the light of the setting suns bathed them in gold, she realized that the protector she had once rejected had become her anchor, her guide, and the person to whom she owed more than life itself. And in that quiet moment, she understood the truth. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who leave the deepest mark on your heart. And for Princess Lyraya, that hero was human.